Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second half of day three of reInvent. Now, we have a couple of interesting topics coming up. We're going to start off this with Mr. Sushant Samudrala, who is going to be talking about cyber law. I'm going to introduce Sushant to you and tell you a little bit about him. Meanwhile, the screen share can be set up so Sushant can prep. Before that, on behalf of reInvent and Rochester team, Sushant, we wish you a very warm welcome to reInvent, and we're happy to have you for the conference. And we look forward to hearing your views on the topic of cyber law, which is a little different from what we've been listening to so far, which is mostly technical, very technical, and cybersecurity. It's going to be a breath of fresh air to listen to the other side of what actually goes into protecting and enforcing the cybersecurity laws and standards that we have around the world. Now, a little bit about Sushant. Sushant is a cyber law expert and techno-legal consultant. He is the CEO of Sushant IT Law Associates. He is an academician, author, corporate trainer, and legal mentor. He has spoken in more than 900 conferences and has addressed in more than 120 webinars during the pandemic. He has published various articles in international and national conferences. He has received many awards and accolades and has recently been awarded as Best Cyber Lawyer of the Year 2020 by India Legal. He received International Achievers Award Excellency in Cyber Law from Blueberry International Group in association with NSDC, Ministry of Women and Child Development, the Government of India, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, in recognition for his outstanding professional achievement and inspiring social contributions. With that, I hand the stage over to you, Sushant. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Once again, I would like to start off by thanking the organizers, and I'm very happy to be part of this reInvent conference, and then share my views. So it gives me immense pleasure. Would like to thank the organizers once again for coming up with this beautiful conference. And I thought I should just give you a small overview and glimpse of the legalities surrounding cyberspace. And I would also like to talk of some legalities relating to pen test, because I believe that pen test is the theme of this particular conference. Of course, law is not as interesting as technology, but let me try to just make it a bit of more interesting to you. Can we go to the next slide, please? I would first of all like to tell you that I believe we are all digital slaves. The reason is, whenever slaves work hard, it is the master who engages the slaves who is at a lot of profit. But I believe we are all digital slaves because we are all working day in and day out and putting up a lot of content over social media, and also generating a lot of content over this over the top applications, be it Skype, or be it WhatsApp, or be it any of the other platforms. So it is these companies who are getting benefited because of our hard work. So in that context, I thought we are all digital slaves. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, I would like to start off by saying that cyber law and cyber security are two constant life companions for us during our journey towards the digital life. And we saw that the Indian government has exercised its power under the Indian cyber law to go ahead and block certain Chinese apps, of which TikTok also was one of the significant applications. So how was this possible? This was possible because of our Indian cyber law, which I believe is one of the most important and most significant piece of legislation formed by independent India. If I were to talk of three important laws formed up by independent India after independence, I will definitely tell you that Indian cyber law is going to be one among them. I'll let you know how as we discuss forward. Can we go to the next slide? Cybercrime today is changed its dimensions altogether. The cybercrime stores that have been now made available, which are giving you access to more than 43,000 hacked servers. Well, cyber attacks are on the galore, and specifically during this COVID-19, I think uh, cybercrime is here to stay. And the global cost of cybercrime in one of the surveys was mentioned as 6 trillion US dollars. But I believe those are just conservative numbers. Actuals will be far more. Can we go to the next slide, please? While we're all busy working from home and looking at OTT platforms, I believe Apple and Netflix were some of the imitated brands for launching phishing attacks, specifically during this period of COVID-19. I had a lot of clients who had come to me regarding Netflix subscriptions which were fake. So I believe a lot of fake generation of Netflix applications was going viral during this period of COVID, and a lot of people falling prey to it and losing out huge amount of data as also money. Next slide, please. I thought I should just take you through the small case that happened long time back on Twitter. Well, we're all having this habit of tweeting and also posting a lot of information relating to our professional, personal, and social lives. And there was this instance wherein one of the sailors of the Western countries came back to his home and family, and he was going to a particular place as part of his official responsibilities. And he happened to talk to his daughter to in asking her what particular items she would like to get, she would like him to get from that particular place. Well, the daughter did nothing but made a simple tweet saying that, hey, my dad is traveling to such and such a place, and what are your suggestions in what kind of items should, as a girl, can be procured from that particular place. For this small tweet made by this daughter of the sailor, huge amount of legal consequences were faced by the sailor and also his family. What happened? The mission was a secret mission. Obviously, since it leaked out in the public domain, the government actually tried to initiate legal consequences by initiating legal cases, and the sailor had to be imprisoned for no fault of his, but for a simple, innocent tweet made by his daughter. I think these are the kinds of implications from a legal perspective that are happening across these social media posts. And we also started to see that a lot of social media posts were made as grounds for arresting people during this COVID-19, because lots of state and non-state actors were being releasing different kinds of statements and fake narratives and posts relating to government and government initiatives relating to COVID-19 has resulted in a lot of legal consequences. A lot of people were sent legal notices by CBCID department asking them to come and show cause the reason, and also give them a proper explanation regarding the same, and also ask them to delete the same in order to avoid legal consequences. I think these that we have to quickly realize. Can we go to the next slide, please? In 2021, there's a cyber attack every 11 seconds. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be watchful. It was 14 seconds earlier, but now the time frame is just getting closer and closer. So, I believe that the cyber law and cyber security will be two elements that will be part of your life, though you're not a technology person or you're not a lawyer. Next slide, please. We started to see cyber attacks even on law firms. Well, we've seen that a famous law firm which handles celebrity clients' information was hit with a cyber attack, and a lot of information relating to these celebrities was in the hands of the attackers. So no one is spared by the attackers. We've seen a lot of industries. We've seen the Bruno Hospital in Czech Republic, which was the largest COVID testing laboratory, which was hit with a cyber attack. And we've seen a lot of companies, including Cognizant, who was hit with a cyber attack, and also Honda, which is an automobile company, who had to literally stop production because of their ransomware attack being hit upon them. We've also seen a lot of cyber attacks on a couple of other industries like NHAI, also the power grids. We saw the Mumbai getting blackout for 2 days. I think these are all just glimpses of how important cybersecurity is in different kinds of fields or businesses. Can we go to the next slide, please? Well, WhatsApp has been the new de facto mode in India, and I believe that all of you might have looked at the recent controversial update that WhatsApp has come up with regarding its privacy policy. But what I want to tell you is, from a legal perspective, WhatsApp is still not changing any of its policies with regard to this. When I looked at the terms and conditions of WhatsApp long time back, way back in 2016, I quickly got realized that it had a very different kind of a statement that is made applicable. It says that anything that you share on WhatsApp whether it's audio, video, image, or text, becomes information in public domain. Well, once the information becomes available in the public domain, there is no privacy and there is absolutely nothing that you can do from a legal perspective. I think this particular statement still continues, and there's no change whatsoever with regard to the statements in WhatsApp policies. Without realizing this, I think all of us are sharing all kinds of information relating to our personal, sensitive, professional, and social. I'll also talk about what's sensitive and what's personal under law. But just to make you get the right side of law, I thought I should just make you aware about this particular update. So be watchful when you're sharing out audio, video, image, or text. And it's the fake, fake, fake all around, my friends. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, a lot of fake apps, fake vaccines. I also started to receive some kinds of cases where people are trying to sell fake COVID-19 products, be it sanitizers, masks, or the kinds of uh, face shields or PPE kits. I'd seen some of them come to me saying that, on social media, a lot of business is happening across this kinds of COVID products. And one particular company advertised that it's going to give all of these at a very low cost to corporate companies. And one of our clients, they happened to actually purchase in bulk quantity because there were almost around 3,000 plus employees in their organization. And they wanted to give this as part of the official protection measures to all the employees. And with all of the lockdown now slowly getting off in places like the metropolitan cities, I think all these kinds of companies are trying to just make the profit by selling these fake products. The order number was generated, call center details were also given, but later on, once the payment was made, no order was shipped, no contact details whatsoever were available with regard to respect of this particular company on social media. I think these are some things that I would want you to be aware of. And one more important aspect that I thought of sharing with you is fake news and fake narratives have been the new toast of the times. All of us using a smartphone have become global authors, global transmitters of fake information. Let me tell you, as I'm talking to you this evening, though we don't have a dedicated fake news law in India, but still, if you're trying to share, transmit, or trying to disseminate fake news, you can still be facing legal consequences, specifically under the Information Technology Act, which is the Indian cyber law. In addition to that, you could also face punishments and penalties from IPC 468 because this amounts to a forged electronic record. I will also talk about that as we discuss forward. But just to tell you that WhatsApp admins and Facebook admins, you need to quickly realize that there are now legal provisions criminalizing fake news dissemination. So be very watchful in your groups. Next slide, please. I believe the national cyber security policy is just a mere paper tiger. The reason is that no effectiveness. It's been 7 or 8 odd years, but no development. We're just hoping to see what part comes as part of national cyber security strategy, and that will be very interesting. I believe that cyber security is nowhere down the horizon. It's already arrived. I think we have to pay serious attention to cyber security. Next slide, please. Cyber sovereignty has also now become a new reality. A lot of countries are making their cyber laws not just applicable to the physical boundaries, but also to the Arctic regions and polar regions, outer seabeds, and also the outer space. Well, that's the kinds of new concept that's starting to emerge. And China has already gone ahead and done some kinds of legal frameworks when I talk of cyber sovereignty. China has demonstrated thought leadership in coming up with three dedicated legal legislations pertaining to cybersecurity during the recent times. I think in one of the legislations, it has made its cyber law applicable to the outer space, the seabeds, and the Arctic region. Next slide, please. Quantum computing has already arrived. I think already 50 qubit and 20 qubit quantum computers have already started to come up. They've been launched. We have been seeing that these quantum computers have the capability to break all the algorithms and passwords just within a couple of hours. I think the legalities surrounding to quantum computing would have to be addressed in a proper sense as we go forward, because it brings forward distinct amount of legal challenges. Next slide, please. IoT has already been the flavor of the times since all of us are making use of these gadgets, whether it's smart TVs, smart wearables, these Alexas, and the Google Homes of the world. I think what we need to quickly realize is that any information that's getting recorded on these devices also is legal evidence, thanks to Section 65 B of the Indian Evidence Act, making legal admissibility for digital evidence. So I'll just tell you a quick narrative of an incident that has come up on IoT device. Well, be very careful because these devices have inbuilt microphones that record all the conversations and interpret these conversations. And we've seen one of the cases that came to me during the phase of a lockdown when one of my clients was in a meeting, and then he had a particular Amazon Alexa in his home in the same place where he was attending to his online meetings. And lo and behold, a week later, he has received a parcel from Amazon, and then which he was never ordered. Now, how did this come up? Come, the device tried to interpret the conversation and then tried that this particular item is the required by my client, and then it went on to order. Well, these are just some illustrations of IoT based intrusions. Face app was very popular during a period of time, and everybody, including celebrities, were on it. Well, when you look at the terms and conditions of Face app, it's very clear saying no cyber security guaranteed. And more specifically, we don't have any idea how these information, how your photographs will be shared, and who all will be accessing it is no one's clue. So I think in these kind of a scenario, when facial recognition is becoming the new world order, I think it's very important to stay alive to the terms and conditions and policies before making use of any particular application. Next slide, please. Now, what I want to quickly make you understand is if you're using these 7 raw materials, then definitely you need to be aware of cyber law. If you're making use of computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data or information in the electronic format, then you'll have to quickly realize that cyber law is now going to be made applicable on you. Next slide, please. Now, what's exactly cyber law? Just talk to you about that. Next slide, please. It's the law that is governing cyberspace. So it deals typically with computers, internet, data, and all these smart gadgets that we have, as also the kinds of communication devices, mobile apps, websites, and the like. Next slide, please. In India, we have an Indian cyber law, which is by the way of Information Technology Act 2000. It's a new generation law. It's hardly 21 years old, and there are also some rules and regulations made in consensus with the IT Act, of which the IT rules 2011 are very significant. Well, the IT Act was amended in the year 2008, and it's now been 13 years. And lo and behold, that the law is now requiring to be amended given the present scenario. I believe that a lot of discussions are happening across various stakeholders with regard to amendment of IT Act. I think that's going to be very critical during this period of COVID-19 when almost everybody is getting online. Next slide, please. Well, privacy is now being the new fundamental right thanks to the latest Supreme Court's judgment. Now, it's not just going to be an important aspect to protect privacy, but in case of any privacy issues, apart from going ahead with the data privacy legislations, it's also now going to be constitutional law that's going to be made applicable. You can now exercise your remedies under Article 32 and Article 226 of the Indian Constitution in case there's a breach of your privacy. The reason is privacy is now made the fundamental right, and any of these fundamental rights are breached, you can invoke the writ jurisdiction by filing a writ petition in the High Court or the Supreme Court. Next slide, please. I think one of the major things that I want to tell you is that there's a lot of misconception among people when I talk of the Information Technology Act. Well, you'll never find the term cybercrime defined under the Act. The reason is it was never a penal statute. The main fundamental idea of this law is to provide legal recognition to electronic transactions and electronic data interface to promote e-commerce, to encourage e-governance. In those days, we were in a great amount of rush to provide legal recognition to electronic transactions. And apart from that, India didn't have any law which was relating to boost e-governance or e-commerce. Thanks to this particular legislation, that this is the main intention behind the law. Well, the IT Act takes a typical Bollywood movie approach. A typical Bollywood movie has a lot of masala in it. It has romance, it has action, it has comedy, it has drama, and the like. So, likewise, the Indian IT Act is just a step forward. It has tried to talk about some areas relating to e commerce, e governance, digital signatures, electronic signatures, electronic records, something about cyber crimes, something on data protection, something on cyber contraventions, and the like. So, I believe this is just a step forward, and there's a lot of work that needs to happen in the domain of cyber law and cyberspace per se. Next slide, please. So whatever you and I create using computers or electronic medium becomes an electronic record thanks to Section 21T of the IT Act. So your Facebook post, your WhatsApp message, your email, your tweet, anything becomes electronic record. Once it's an electronic record, it can be legal evidence under Indian Evidence Act. Next slide, please. Now, what's a computer under the law? Simple definition, three things. If three elements are present, it can be considered a computer. Arithmetical logical unit, memory, and computational capability. If these three elements are present in any device, that can be considered as a computer under the IT Act. So anything and everything that has these three capabilities can be qualified to be called a computer. So your smart microwave oven is a computer. Your washing machine is a computer. Your printer, your all-in-one is also a computer. Your mobile phone, iPad, all of these are also computers. Next slide, please. The law has also added something called communication devices, which were added in the year 2008, which meant on to include any device that's capable of storing, transmitting, and receiving audio, video, image, or text. So your iPads, which do not have calling facility, still can be considered a communication device. Next slide, please. So I thought I should just give you a small information about defamation, because a lot of defamation is happening online today. And when you look at this case, definitely in this particular case, an employee of a company started sending defamatory emails to his employers, and then other companies which are relating to this particular company. Well, an injunction order was passed, and then a legal action was taken against this particular employee. Next slide, please. Yes, data mining or doing any kinds of corporate espionage is strictly punishable under Section 66 of the IT Act. We have this particular noted case called Abhinav Gupta versus State of Haryana, wherein an employee who was alleged to have hacked into a particular system, and he was alleged that he had stolen a lot of confidential information from the particular system and passed the same to the competitor, and thereby joined the competitor. Now, court has passed out a restraint order against this particular employee. Now, whenever you are doing any kind of an offense using a computer, that becomes computer related offense. Well, two elements that are required: dishonesty and fraudulently. If your intention is dishonest, if you have an intention which is fraudulent, then Section 66 of the IT Act can be made applicable thereof. Next slide, please. So quickly like to tell you that the term hacking was earlier included under the Section 66 of the IT Act, but when the Act was amended, the term hacking was redefined. The concept of unauthorized access was introduced. Two things that are very important in a layman's terms: civil and criminal matters. Civil always has got to do with damages by way of compensation, and criminal always talks about imprisonment and penalty or fines. Now, there is only one particular section which is civil in nature in the IT Act, which is Section 43. So, what does it do? It talks about the different kinds of unauthorized access and related activities. Next slide, please. If you do any of these said activities, then it becomes a cyber contravention. And what happens in case it's a cyber contravention? You could be facing damages by way of compensation up to 5 crore rupees per contravention. So you do 4 contraventions, 20 crores is what you can potentially be sued for. So without the permission of the owner of the computer or in charge of the computer, if you access or secure access, it then is a contravention. You download, copy, extract data. Yes, it's another contravention. You introduce a computer contaminant. Yes, that's another contravention. You damage the working of a system. You disrupt the computer network. You cause denial of access. You provide assistance to facilitate illegal access. You use the charges of services availed by one person without his permission. You damage, destroy, alter, diminish the value and utility of the said document or anything of data or affect it injuriously, another contravention. You steal, conceal, alter the computer source code, then you again it amounts to a cyber contravention. So all of these, ladies and gentlemen, become cyber contraventions. And what happens in case of cyber contravention? I've already told you that damages by way of compensation can be initiated. So these are the kinds of legal issues. Next slide, please. I think even bandwidth, if you're trying to, exceed the bandwidth of a particular program, then that's also going to be covered under this particular section. Next slide, please. Yeah. If anybody is trying to, we had this particular case wherein one particular employee, ex-employee's bank account statement was obtained by a particular company without his permission. That amounted to a cyber contravention under 43B, which I told you, download, copy, extract data. And since the company had also misused it for lodging a false case against the employee, then 66, which I was talking to you about, computer related offense, also was made applicable hereof. Next slide, please. Yes, Pranab Mitra case. A guy was arrested in Mumbai for spoofing, and because he cheated a businessman who's based out of Abu Dhabi and extorted 2,15,000 US dollars. Next slide, please. If you try to make use of a stolen computer resource or stolen mobile phone or stolen computer, then it amounts to punishment under 66B. And you'll not be just accused of stealing the device, you'll also be accused for stealing the data in this particular device. Next slide, please. Identity theft. If you make fake profiles on social media, you try to use some other person's unique identification feature, maybe the photograph, maybe the sound, maybe the handwriting, it amounts to identity theft. That's still a criminal penalty. So sections ranging from 65 to 75 are criminal in nature, and 43 is civil in nature. Next slide, please. Cheating by impersonation. If you impersonate, apart from just creating a fake profile, if you start sending messages from that particular fake profile, then it amounts to cheating by impersonation. 66D, in addition to 415, 416 of IPC, can be put up on you. Next slide, please. Personal privacy. If you try to intrude into the personal privacy of a particular individual using any particular computer or device, it amounts to violation of personal privacy. So privacy in the sense, if you're trying to violate the personal privacy of an individual, which includes the private body parts, etc., that also amounts to privacy, invasion of personal privacy. Next slide, please. So we also have one provision on cyber terrorism, though I believe that this is outdated and requires an amendment. But just to tell you that if you're trying to use the cyberspace for the purpose of threatening the integrity, sovereignty, and also bring about some kind of terror among any set of people, then lo and behold, it now amounts to cyber terrorism, and you could be sent to jail, and life imprisonment can be initiated for that same. Next slide, please. So cyberbullying, cyber stalking, cyber harassments have now become very increased in the terms of COVID-19, and this is also a criminal offense. We have Section 354D of the Criminal Procedure Code, and also Section 66, which could be initiated in case of any kinds of cyberbullying or cyber stalking. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. So trolling also has been included under the ambit of the Indian cyber law. Phishing, yes, if you're engaging in any kinds of phishing activities, we have section 66, 66C, 66D, which can be initiated for any kinds of phishing related activities. Next slide, please. Yeah, what I wish to tell you is that law has come up with something called sensitive personal data or information, which mean your passwords, your financial information, biometric information, sexual orientation, health and medical records and information become your sensitive personal data or information. Next slide, please. We also have an exception, that is that any information disclosed under RTI or information available in public domain does not qualify to be sensitive personal data or information. Well, regarding personal information, any information with which you can identify a particular individual, including their name, phone number, email ID, blood group, or office ID, etc., if including IP address becomes the personal information. So the law very clearly has come up with definitions and has put up a kinds of legal compliance under Section 43A, read along with IT Rules 2011. But it's not effectively implemented. But just to give you a glimpse that we have been making some kinds of step towards data protection as well. Next slide, please. The law has also come up with a definition for cybersecurity under the law, specifically when the IT Act was amended in 2008 under Section 2 NB. Cybersecurity includes not just the physical security of the device, but also includes the security relating to the information or data in that particular device. This is only just one piece of information. I think we're just in the infant stage when it comes to cybersecurity law. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide, please. Yeah, we have the nodal agency under the for cyber security under the IT Act, which is the Computer Emergency Response Team of India, certain under Section 70B of the IT Act, and it's the nodal agency for maintaining cyber security. And there are a lot of initiatives done by them. They also frequently publish white papers and advisories relating us with regard to the cyber safety measures per se. Next slide, please. So reporting of cybersecurity incidents has been made mandatory under Rule 39 of the IT Rules 2011, which imposes certain kinds of an obligation on a company which is intermediary. Intermediary is any entity who, on behalf of any other entity, either receives, stores, or transmits electronic records or provides any recognition or services with respect to that records. So even the organizer of this conference is an intermediary. A website is an intermediary. A mobile application is an intermediary. Any particular, if you're a lawyer or if you're a chartered accountant, you're a doctor providing professional services by collecting information which is electronic in nature specifically, then you also become an intermediary. So we have intermediary guidelines. If you are intermediary, you must have due diligence in place. You must have proper data protection agreements. You need to have a privacy policy. You need to have grievance officer being appointed. All of these are mandated under the present laws. If you don't do that, there are two kinds of penalties, civil and criminal. Civil could be damages by way of compensation. Criminal could be for the top management of the organization, the middle management, and each and every particular employee who's handling that particular sensitive or personal information. So we have offense by companies under Section 85 of the IT Act. But if you exercise your due diligence and if you comply with the law gives you Suraksha Kavach, a statutory exemption under Section 79 of the IT Act. Next slide, please. So we have some agencies for cybersecurity. We have the National Cybersecurity Coordinator. We have the Cyber and Information Security Division in the MHA. We have the NCIAPC, Critical Information Infrastructure. We have the Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center. We have the Defense Cyber Agency. I think these are different agencies that have been come up for protecting cybersecurity. Next slide, please. Cyber resilience has now been the new de facto norm for all companies during COVID-19. A lot of people come to me for drafting out their cyber resilience plans. In case you're hit with a cyber attack, how quickly can you come back to normalcy? I think that's what is required during this period of COVID-19. And the cyber resilience will be the new order as I see. Next slide, please. So just before I conclude, I thought I should just give you some basic parameters relating to penetration testing. It's very important that the contract is there executed between the penetration tester and the company who's engaging you. I think the rules of engagement document would have to clearly specify the location, the scope, the frequency, the depth, the time, and reporting formats, and any emergency contacts for incident management because we, as in our law firm, have drafted out several contracts between companies and penetration testing persons, whether they are individuals or companies. And I just want to tell you something: when it's illegal to do penetration testing, if you're trying to do penetration testing without explicit authorization from the target company, and you attempt to gain access and penetrate into that, then it amounts to illegal activity. And in case you're contacted by a third party agency to conduct a penetration testing on another company's assets, it is very important that you seek authorization. And then, because if you don't do that, it amounts to illegal penetration testing. What happens when you do that? You can get exposed to two kinds of liabilities. As I told you, Section 66 and also Section 43A, which would be the legal provisions used in case you're not taking prior consent. It's very important that the consent is recorded in writing or is in electronic format, legal, because failing which your penetration testing activity will still be considered illegal in the eyes of law. Well, if you're making use of any pirated or unauthorized tools, then it also amounts to illegal activity. And if you're exceeding your access and then penetrating into a network which you're not supposed to do, it still amounts to illegal activity. Not just that, if you're trying, when somebody authorizes you and then you do the respective testing of a target network during the timings not specified under authorization, that also amounts to illegal penetration testing. So apart from that, we also have Section 70 of the IT Act, which talks about protected system. And in case you're trying to penetrate into a protected system, 10 years imprisonment and along with fine can be initiated against you. So it's very important that it's to have a proper contract and all of these points to be included thereof. Apart from that, the affected company can also sue you for damages by way of compensation, and he has to go and file that particular suit with the adjudicating officer in case the matter is below 5 crore rupees. So otherwise, he'll has to exercise the same by filing a writ or any kinds of other legal cases in high courts or the Supreme Court thereof. Now, let's say I just tell you two things and then wind up very quickly. It's very important that you also have proper jurisdictional clauses that are put up in the particular agreement. Jurisdiction is the power of the court, which law will be applicable, and how do you actually try to address in case of any issues. Let's take an example. If a company which is based out of Bombay has entered into an agreement for performing some penetration testing on their computers in Hyderabad with anybody who's there in the US, then it's a different matter altogether. Suppose if that particular penetration tester conducts the same from US, but it has impacted or injured someone in UK, then in this scenario, I believe everybody is directly or indirectly made applicable under the laws. What laws will come into picture? Who can be sued? How will legal adjudications take place is very, very important that need to come in. And specifically, I would request you that in case you're making use of any kinds of pen testing, it is very important that you specify what is the exact purpose, what tools are you running, and what are the kinds of indemnities and responsibilities. I think these are some things that we'll have to quickly understand, because indemnity is that in case any unforeseen consequence happens, who's going to indemnify and make good such loss or damages? And scope is also something that will have to be quickly understood, because otherwise, if an ethical hacker, in case he exceeds access, that becomes illegal altogether. So this is what I thought of sharing with you, and I believe that to conclude, more capacity building is necessary. There's a requirement to come up with a dedicated cyber security law. We don't have any international cyber security law. We have just an international commission on cyber security law, and I believe the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders in terms of cyber security would have to be clearly defined, and the norms of behavior and the due diligence and the compliance with respect to cybersecurity law would have to be the need of the hour. I think the IT Act and IT rules are just the law on the eye, but different countries have come up with this different distinctive cybersecurity laws. I think these are going to be the new laws that I can see. Well, internet as a paradigm never sleeps. Internet as a paradigm never forgets. So these two, I would like to conclude. Once again, thank the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And if I've just exceeded by 2 or 3 minutes, I think I am very sorry about it. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them.
Okay, Sushant. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I think that was a very informative session when it comes to letting people know what their scope and what their legal options are, especially when it comes to their privacy and what are the laws that they can actually get behind when it comes to and privacy. Now, we do have a couple of questions. The first one is freedom of speech and the First Amendment in the US protects fake news and conspiracy theories. It's quite bad. The question is, do you want freedom or security? You can't have both.
See, I believe that freedom has to be there in a limited manner, but over excessive usage of freedom is not good. Likewise, too much of surveillance also on the internet cannot be made practically possible, if you ask me. So I believe a perfect balance has to be striked in order to maintain both of these.
Okay, so the follow-up question is you were talking about how we have articles that have been introduced to prevent or you could get into trouble for spreading of fake news, correct?
Correct.
Now, how do you fake news and freedom of speech?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question that you've come up with. The main distinctive parameters, I believe, are in case that, but its freedom of speech is entirely different. Just because I have freedom of speech doesn't mean that I can be excessively using it. Well, if you look at the Constitution, it very clearly says that all fundamental rights are subject to reasonable restrictions. I think, given that scenario, what determines to be very important is that only authentic information has to be shared. If you want to share anything, please verify the authenticity and veracity before sharing it, because we see that a lot of information gets on the internet without even looking at the authenticity of the particular information. And we, as users, we do not even verify, we don't exercise our due diligence, and we expect that the law has to take its own course. I think that's a wrong presumption altogether. Just like how you lock your house and then go out, I think a basic understanding of what's right, what's not, has to be there in the mindset of the people.
Okay, so the next question is some people use their knowledge for destructive purposes. Do you think that educators should do more on how the knowledge they provide is used?
Yes, I think definitely. See, some information relating to the laws, do's and don'ts will have to be specifically mentioned, because we see that a lot of ethical hacking is happening. But if you ask me as a lawyer, there is no distinction between a hacker and an ethical hacker under the present Indian legal scenario. So it only depends that if you try to have your skill in a wrongful manner, you need to be aware that there are going to be legal consequences that are going to be you know the message of deterrence has to go. So that being so, I think apart from coming up with cyber security or ethical hacking, I think even cyber law has to be made part of their curriculum, so that they know what is right and what is wrong before they actually make use of their skill in any manner.
Okay. The next question is most of the attacks occur from outside of your respective country. Most of them originate from Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea. These laws will not apply to these state actors. So, what are your options when it comes to facing an attack from an outside entity, from outside your physical boundaries of your country?
That's a very good question because I believe internet has made geography a history. So answering this question,
Yes.
we already have section 1, subsection 2, and section 75 of the IT Act, which say that no matter whichever nationality or the attacker may be, in case he's physically affecting computer system, computer resource physically located in India, he can be tried under the existing provisions. But however, I see no reason why the police or the enforcement agencies should not book these intermediaries as co-accused if they're failing to give information or if they're failing to respond. I think that kind of an approach is already there, but I think more practical approaches will have to be looked at. We already have MLATs, which say Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, but on an average, these MLATs are not very effective. And I believe internationally there is no global cyber law or cyber crime convention. We only have the Budapest or the EU, which only have a very limited scope. But I think in the absence of this, definitely jurisdictional issues will continue to hamper cybercrime convictions.
Okay, so thank you for that. My last question would be is in Europe they have implemented GDPR. You were talking a little bit about how privacy has now become a fundamental right. So then GDPR in Europe basically ensures or ties into ensuring that people's private information is solely in their hands. So do we have something similar to this in India, or are they working on something that's similar to GDPR?
See, GDPR is something that has completely brought everything to grinding halt, and I believe that in India we are working on the personal data protection bill. Well, but I believe that unless it is effectively implemented, there is no use of coming up with any legislation because already the IT Act has come up with some provisions, but these seem to be just a paper tiger because of lack of implementation. I think what the European Union has done is it has effectively implemented. I was stunned and surprised when a lot of startups also came to me asking me to help them to comply with GDPR. They don't know the law in India, but they know the law in the European Union because of the penalty. It says 4% of your global turnover or 4 crore Indian rupees, whichever is higher. I think given this scenario, if there is a check and balance that is maintained, I think definitely we will also be able to achieve something much more than that also because we have a lot of experts, we have the infrastructure, but only thing we are not able to effectively implement it. I think that effective implementation, if it's made part of it, and even if personal data protection bill, I think a lot of consideration has to be given the present technology and present emerging and disruptive technologies like AI, blockchain, and other technologies. I think if the law takes into consideration all of these and gets passed, it will be very good so that we can have effective data protection regulation, just like or much more than European Union.
Okay, and my last question is in under GDPR, when a data breach occurs and if a person's personal information is leaked, he is eligible for financial remuneration from the company who was handling his data. So in India, do we have something like that? If your personal information is leaked, or the company that is storing your personal information, if it's leaked, is the company obligated to pay you some financial remuneration
See, even in
as a compensation?
Okay. Even in GDPR, it's very clear that in case the data breach has taken place beyond the control, or in case of exercise, I mean, they have exercised their due diligence and beyond their control, still you can't expect financial compensation. See, the GDPR or any law for that matter gives you certain guidelines and certain compliance obligations. If you exercise them and still something beyond takes place, because we are all in the cyber world, and we can definitely expect that there'll be a lot of things that will be beyond our control. So despite we having jurisdictional provisions or laws or any kinds of cyber security measures, still because we are in the cyber world, I believe definitely that things will be out of control. But what is really impressive in GDPR is the kind of compliance obligations that are put up. See, that includes coming up with proper documented policies, proper document data processing agreements, and proper transparency with regard to data. I think that's something which is appreciable. In India also we have the IT Act, which is specifically talking about reporting mechanisms and financial damages. I've just specified, if you look at my presentation, we have rule 3 of rule 9 of the IT rules, which mandate that companies have to report. In case they don't, then again legal consequences can be initiated against them. And likewise, 43A, read along with IT rules, mandate that they need to have reasonable security practices and procedures while handling, processing, storing your personal data or sensitive data. But only thing is, it's not effectively implemented. And in case they're not doing that, we have Section 85 of the IT Act, which provides liability not just upon the company as a legal person, but also on the top management, middle management, and also each and every employee handling or dealing with that particular sensitive or personal information. But only thing is the effectiveness is not there, and the awareness about these is also not there. I think these two are the only reasons, as I see, that are pushing the entire envelope down the line.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Sushant. I think your entire session has been very clear, concise, and very easy for us lay people who are not well versed in law and cyber law to follow. And we definitely have gained a lot of information when it comes to what are the different laws that govern the cyberspace around us. So, and I just heard from my team member, you gave us this presentation despite not feeling too well. From the bottom of hearts, we definitely thank you for coming and improving the knowledge sharing of our session. Thank you so much, Sushant. We look forward to hosting you for our future reInvent conferences as well. As always, stay safe and have a great weekend, Sushant.
Thank you so much for those wonderful words. And I'm very excited and very happy to be part of this very interesting and very inquisitive conference during this period of COVID-19. Thank you so much. Stay cyber safe, stay cyber secured. Cyber hygiene, personal hygiene are the two mantras I can say as a cyber lawyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sushant.